Hello and welcome to another episode of the Women of Power show with myself, Lovelda Vincenzi. This is the show where women share their personal power tools, the techniques, strategies, and ways of being which have enabled their success in both life and business. Today's show, we're joined by two incredible powerhouses. First up, we've got Stacia Keogh, who is a story speaker and pitch coach supporting change makers to be seen and heard, leading one story at a time. We're also joined by the incredible Janine Esbrand, who is an executive coach, career strategist, TEDx speaker, lawyer, and mother of two. Hello and welcome, ladies.
Hi. Hello.
It's great to have you both on the show. Stacia, I'm very excited to hear a little bit more from you, actually. So being a speaker coach myself, I'm often running into women who are very, very keen to tell their story. So before we even dive into it, how did you get into story coaching and speaker coaching? Like, where was the starting point for you with that?
Well, I've been a traditional performance storyteller for over 30 years. So I've been telling traditional tales all over the place in schools and in public venues and in tents and festivals for quite a long time. And I really got interested, really intrigued, I think, with personal stories, people's own stories, because people are grabbing onto traditional tales because they're looking for that DNA to find out, how do you do life? And of course, it's all contained in those stories because that's how people have been doing life for, thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And I started just working with people on speaking skills, but ever present was people going, you've got to tell your story, or you've got to, use story, but not many people understood what a story was, how to find one, how to structure it, and how to use it. And so that's how I developed my business, with answering just those questions, where to find your story, how to structure it, and then how to match that to your message so that it really illuminates and resonates with people. Because at the end of the day, storytelling is an audience-formed craft. So it's about listening as well as telling. It's kind of like if a tree falls in the forest, do you hear it? So you want your story to go out, be heard, and then repeated. So that's really how I started in with it, is taking the speaking coach skills that I have of public speaking, using your voice and all of that, presentation skills, and enveloping story into it.
Love it. And the truth is, we all have a story within us, don't we? We've all got experiences which create those stories. Janine, as a career strategist and executive coach, where do you find that those stories become important in people pursuing their career further?
Yes, absolutely. Knowing your story and really identifying what's most relevant from your story is crucial when you're looking to make career transitions and when you're looking to elevate yourself within your career. So I work with clients to understand what is your story and which parts of your story do you really want your potential employer or your boss or your industry to know, so that it can help you to get to where it is you want to go. So I love what Stacia just shared about owning your story. It's really, really important, and the more you can do that, the more likely it is that you're able to articulate the value you can bring to whoever it is that you're communicating with. So I think storytelling is so powerful in your career.
I love that you said it was storytelling to articulate value, because I would think, look, I'm not in one of them jobs anymore, but when I was, I genuinely did not think about storytelling as an important tool in terms of articulating value. So Janine, how do you bring this together? What are the key things that you think people need to be able to pull out, whether they're, because I think with Stacia, you're working more with businesses, but there seems like there's a lot of overlap between whether you're a business or an employee in terms of being able to articulate your value through story. Is there a step-by-step process, Janine, or some key things that people should be aware of to help them to better articulate their value?
Yeah, I think The point that Stacia mentioned about your story being remembered is crucial. The reason why your story will be remembered is if your story is relevant. So the first step is for you to really establish, what do they need to know? What do I want to leave them with about me? And when you know that and you understand kind of what the purpose is of your interaction, then you can work backwards from there and say, well, if I'm trying to get a promotion or if I'm trying to transition into a new role, what do they need to know about me to understand that I'm the ideal candidate for that? When you know what that is, then you can look at your story and say, what do I have in my toolkit that I can actually talk about to connect the dots for them, to make it easy for them to see that I am the right person. So your story, it's really about crafting it and drawing out the right pieces so that you can speak to what it is they want and what it is that they're looking for.
Awesome. And Stacia, do you see, is it a similar principle when you're thinking more exec businesses versus, because you work more with brand stories, are the principles similar in terms of pulling out value, or is it slightly different?
Yeah, I mean, the brand stories that I work with are usually for entrepreneurs. So it is that they are their business and they are pitching for, you know, either investment or clients or just to gather that tribe. Because there's three things that your story should do, and that's either bond with your audience or persuade them to do something differently, which is, or you want them to envision something that hasn't happened before. And that's incredibly important right now, and especially with the leaders that Janine works with, because leaders have to have the vision to lead, or they're not leading us anywhere. They have to know where we're going. And so that's where sort of imagination comes in, you know, to be able to tell somebody something that hasn't happened yet. And that's why story works really well, because it gives a context to whatever it is you're talking about, whether it's a product or a service or just an idea, really. So when I work with individuals, there's three main stories that they tell, which is their value story, their purpose story, and their origin story, which is where they got the good idea in the first place. And with leaders, it really is about change, because and vision, because that's always going to involve a change. And if I can boil story down to anything, it's a series of changes, because everything changes in a story. So it's all about change with the story.
And is that the same, Janine, then for, because I'm seeing so much overlap, what do you say then to those people who maybe they're early on, so they're early on entrepreneurs, or they're just starting out their career, or their career shifting, and they can't see where they're going to have a relevant story? Are there any top tips for pulling out those value propositions or those stories that are going to be relevant when it seems like maybe there's nothing that you've done before that's relevant? So you're brand new or you're transitioning career. Janine, what do you think? Are there some top tips for those individuals who probably listening here going, well, it's all great for you because you've been doing it for ages, but I'm brand new to this, or I don't have that raft of background. Where do I start? So how do you position your value, Janine, when you're new in a career?
Yeah, I think that oftentimes when you're looking at it, people can start with the surface level and say, well, I don't have any relevant experience, or what I've done isn't directly aligned to what they're looking for. But actually, it's about recognizing that you can drill down to the skill level, and you can drill down and say, okay, I don't have that specific experience, but what have I been doing? What skills have I been using? What have I developed in terms of my expertise? And then how can I find alignment there? So when you drill it down, things like communication skills, things like being able to use your initiative, those types of things are going to be universal and relevant. So it's looking for, how can I find those things that are relevant in the role that I'm looking for, or wherever it is I'm trying to move into. So there are synergies. You can find them. You just have to dig a little bit deeper for them.
So that's like chunking it up a little bit, right? It's kind of saying, rather than focusing on something direct, what are the common skills that can be applied across multiple industries so that you can still have that relevancy? I'm guessing, Stacia, you've got similar sort of story impact, right? I work a lot with entrepreneurs, And often what we hear are the rags to riches stories. So, oh, it was really terrible and I had this really hard time and now I've gone through all of this transition and voila, look at me. What if we don't have that story?
Yeah, there's so many different stories that you can tell. This is the thing. A lot of people think their story is boring or they don't have one. So like Janine was saying, it's drilling down really, and it's finding those themes that you have been actually, your story never shuts up. So you've been doing it all along and moving and just refining it and doing it in different guises, that thing that your soul came to this earth to do. And I really specifically look at the threshold moments, the moments of transition and change where you were faced with a question and a gap opened up and you had to make a decision to go to the left or the right. And how you did that, that tells you a lot about who you are. So, you know, you follow those paths along in those little trail of breadcrumbs. Is it rags to riches all the time? You know, that's not really how a story works, because a story works like a heartbeat. It's not a linear path. It's more like, you know, you make choices, you know, negative or positive, not good and bad, just this or that can take you in one direction or another. But those things actually form the person that you are, and you gather from those all this knowledge and wisdom and experience. And so that's really why I'm so driven to, you know, ignite people to stand up and speak about their story, because when people start talking about their lived experience, then they realize, oh, they got all this wisdom and this knowledge right here all the time. And that's the kind of stuff that we need people to share, because when people started sharing with their authentic voice and talking about real lived experience, that's when we get and different perspectives. You know, so we need people that we haven't heard from before speaking. We need to hear from people that are unlikely heroes, not just rags to riches, but, you know, maybe somebody who's been putting one foot in front of the other and gone from rags to rags and still climbing and finding different things to do with those rags. So I don't know, you know, riches are in the eye of the beholder. So it's kind of an interesting thing when people start telling their real story and they crack it open and they realize that it's very different from the one that they were supposed to be telling.
It's really cool that you said that, because we can't, I guess not everybody can necessarily relate to the rags to riches, because that's not everybody's experience. And you touched on a few things there that I think is quite important when we're talking about experiences. We're currently in this pandemic. Well, at the time of filming this particular episode, we're totally in a pandemic. And for many, that experience can be quite challenging for those who perhaps are in a career that they're not loving right now, or they're wanting to kind of get their voices heard out and transition, where some companies might have had to put a lockdown on a hire freeze in terms of being able to pay people more. Janine, what top tips can you give for people to navigate the current landscape we're in? And, you know, if you're listening to this or watching this after we've passed through the pandemic, there's always opportunities, there are always times within organizations in which things are a little bit tougher and it can be harder to progress in career. Is it still possible to do that even when the market is down?
Yeah, it is possible. And I've seen clients who have landed roles in the midst of this pandemic. I think the key is to recognize that the focus needs to be different, and there needs to be a shift, because you need to recognize the landscape that you're in and speak to that. So when it comes to organizations, are they hiring? Yes, but who are they hiring? They're hiring people who are helping them to solve their problems, who are helping them to navigate this pandemic, who are helping them to achieve their objectives. So when you're looking at, you know, applying or positioning yourself, you can't just come at it from a place of, you know, I want a promotion or I want this new role. It's recognizing what they're looking for, recognizing what their struggles are, and you be the solution to their problem. And you know how to position yourself as the solution to their problem. That's how you're able to like navigate it and advance in this time, because at the end of the day, companies are going to hire where there's a necessity. So if they are growing, they're in a place where they have to replace people, that's when they're going to hire. So you just need to know what's their objective and how do I fit into that.
Companies, it's about positioning. And I suppose brand stories are also very much about positioning. Stacia, what is it that you think? Because, I mean, brand stories are, I want to say a weird one. They can be a challenging one to wrap our heads around, positioning our brand effectively. What would you say are some of the biggest mistakes you see people do when it comes to writing that brand story that attracts the ideal client, investor, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, well, I think the thing is that it's understanding what a story is. It has to have characters, it has to have an event, and it has to have like it has to have a conflict because again, you know, conflict story is about conflict changing life, which is why it's always about change, and conflict does change life. And so I always tell people, don't be negaphobic, you know, like you were saying, the rags to riches, but the riches to rags story is far more interesting. How you had it all and lost it, and then what are you going to do? So I think with a brand story, the common mistake that I see people make is they don't really talk about a specific event and really build that out and show the transformation that what they do brings to their client. And they have to have a character, because what people want in a story at the end of the day really is they want new information, but they want an old mirror so that they can recognize themselves or someone that they know or someone that they aspire to be or someone they never want to be in that story, because we identify. And then we get the new information and oh, if you do it that way, it turns out this. And if you do it this way, it turns out that. Got it. So I think with the brand story, it's building out that normal, that setting. And the more you build that out, then you've got much more landscape and information that you can change. Then you have your framing character that goes through it. And I know a lot of brand stories have used the hero quest structure to death, but that's a story for another time. But and they make their client the hero in that story. But we need to see your client as in that story, and then seeing the emotion, the authentic emotion, because that's exactly what story can do. It brings out all the sensory feels so that people can lean into it, because people can then hear it, they can see it, they can feel it, they can taste it, they can smell it, and they go, ah, yeah, I know that place. And then they can follow along with it, and then they can see the transition and the transformation that happens. So it's having that character, that event, real authentic emotion, and that transformation.
Authentic emotion, transformation. But something you said there really struck me, and that's being able to see yourself in the story. And Janine, yeah. I know you work almost exclusively with high achieving women. And if we're honest, we already know, and part of the reason why this show exists is because in positions of senior management and leadership, we just do not have enough women in those sorts of positions. So it's quite difficult for us to be able to see ourselves out there in the space. What tips, you know, what do you see that women do really, really well that helps them to excel and get into those better roles and be able to leverage the opportunity and the skills that they've got? And what also doesn't work very well? If you can give us like a couple of things that you see, these are great, here are a couple of really great tips, and here are two things that I see way too often and y'all just need to stop.
Yeah, so I think that one of the things that is really, really powerful is to get yourself in community with people who are doing the thing that you would like to do, because oftentimes we stay in our sphere of influence. We stay within, you know, our colleagues that we're used to and within our industry even. And when you look to the right and you look to the left and you don't see anyone doing what you want to do, you feel like it's not possible. However, outside your immediate circles, there are women, there are people who are doing those things. So once you put yourself in community, you start to see what's possible, and it opens up your belief around what you could do. So I think that's really, really important, and it's definitely lacking, particularly in kind of professional services. I work with a lot of lawyers and people from those kinds of industries, and people are quite stuck in just moving in the same circles. So I would say moving outside of where you normally operate to find your people who are doing those types of things. And then also recognizing that just because you haven't seen it done before doesn't mean you can't be the first person. So you might need to be the trailblazer. You might need to be the person to show that it is possible. So not shying away from going for something that you want just because you think that I haven't seen anyone do it, but recognize that you might have the skills and the expertise that are required to do a good job in that position. And I think the thing not to do is to say, you know, I can't possibly do that. There is, you know, imposter syndrome is huge. People feeling like I can't do that. I don't tick all of the boxes on that job spec, therefore I can't go for that particular role. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't discount yourself. If you discount yourself, then it's definitely not going to happen. Instead, really lean into what are my strengths? What can I bring to the table? How do I articulate that? And lead with that, rather than being apologetic about the fact that you don't tick all the boxes. I see that way too much, and it really does affect people's mindset, and it stops them from moving forward because they've already said in their minds, I can't do this. So then how are you going to show up and really share what you need to share in the way that you need to share it, so that someone will say yes to you coming on board or you being elevated to a new position?
You're so absolutely spot on, Janine. It's so important that we understand that we can also be trailblazers, because I think sometimes as women, if we can't see that person in front of us, then we assume nobody like us can do that role. And so I do think it's so super important that we understand that maybe we could lead the way for a change. How about that? So this show is called The Women of Power Show. And so I would be amiss to bring two powerful women onto this show and not ask you both this very important question. And we'll start with you, Stacia. What is it that you think is the essence of a woman's power?
Agency. You know, I think that's something that we've been fighting for all this while, because one of the things that Janine said about, you know, we have to tick all these boxes and, you know, we have to see somebody do it first, is we're waiting for permission, because it's been thousands and thousands and thousands of years when anytime somebody, we've even seen it in recent times, when you speak out, when you speak up, when you stand up, when you go forward, there's somebody there to knock you down all the time. And so it's a bit difficult. And if you look back in even all the traditional tales, like, I mean, I'm thinking, you know, the Wife of Bath, which is in the Chaucer tales, which Shrek was based on, where she, you know, at the end of the day, she says, would you like me to be beautiful during the daytime and ugly at night, or ugly in the daytime or not? And he said, I'll leave the choice to you. And that's, of course, the magic. And that's, of course, what a woman wants, is sovereignty, you know, control over her own self, her own body, her own choices, and the ability to make these choices and have agency in the world. Because we're here to do good, you know, we're not taking anything from anybody. We're here to add value and take our place and do good. And so I think having agency, having that sovereignty over yourself, your finances, your body, your choices, that's what women want.
I love that. And I think it's a good reminder, because like you say, often we're asking for permission rather than just giving ourselves the permission to be as we should be. So I love that. Janine, what do you think is the essence of a woman's power?
I think courage. I think having the courage to set bold, audacious goals and then really go for it. And in going for it, recognize that the journey is also important. I think all too often people set goals and there's so much focus on the goal that the journey gets lost, and you forget that you're living life in the process, and there's always lessons to be learned along the journey. I remember when I set the goal to become a lawyer, I was so focused on that goal that I was just doing everything I needed to do, tunnel vision. And then I got there and I looked around and I was like, is this it? Like, what I've been doing for my life up to this point, it's all been focused and all consumed, and I had to really reflect and like pick out the lessons along the way. But I think recognizing that as you're moving towards your goal, you're also growing, you're also developing, so there's value in the journey, And then when you achieve the goal, it's fantastic too.
There is value in the journey, y'all. You don't need to just focus right up there on the objective. There is totally value in the journey. I mean, I can hold my hands up. I've been one of those people. I get to the end destination and I'm like, oh, now what? So I love that you said that, to remember that there is value in the journey and to document what our experiences are. So we've got time now for a power tool from each of you. So those of y'all who've been watching this show, you know I ask all of my guests this mean question. If we were to take everything that you've ever done in your life and business and literally just boil it down to a handful of core things, and normally I ask for 3, today we've got time for 1 from each of you. So if we were to take everything, it's mean, I'm not gonna lie, it is mean, everything you've done in your life and business and boil it down to just 1 power tool. So one thing that you can say has had the greatest impact, let's put it this way, the greatest impact on your success in life or business, what would that be, Stacia?
I would have to say creativity and, well, imagination, because I've been making it up all along. And I used to feel, and this is what makes you feel like a fraud all the time. It's like, oh my God, I just did that. I made it up. I didn't have like a certificate. I didn't have like a bunch of, credentials about that. I didn't go to school for it. No, I could just do it. And that in and of itself is genius. And so I've been making things to, take to market. I've been monetizing the skills and the abilities that I have all my life, really. So that creativity to create, to see a connection here and to a connection there, and then put something in between that nobody's ever seen before, that is a genius, that tool that I think we all have access to, and creativity will save your life.
If I had a penny for every time I have people who are wanting to get things right, working with business owners, I want to get it right, I want to get it right. And I say to them so often, you do realize everybody's just kind of making this up as we go along. So I love that you said imagination and creativity. Janine, you've had a little bit of extra time to think about, the tough questions. So what would be the biggest thing for you, your biggest power tool that's had the greatest impact on your life and business?
I think it would be asking myself the question, what's the worst that could happen? Because in so many stages in my career, what I've been able to do, I haven't seen anyone else do it. And there have been challenges, there have been barriers, but I'm like, why can't I though? Why can't I? And what's the worst that could happen if I just step out and do it? And I think just adopting the philosophy that whatever happens, I'm going to win or I'm going to learn. So yes. I've taken away the fear of failure and recognized that, yeah, it might not work out, but I'm going to learn something. So I might as well go for it. And I think that served me really well, both in my career and in my business, because I'm just going to do it and just figure it out as I go, as you guys have just said. Just you're just figuring it out, but you have to be in it to win it, right? You have to put yourself out there if you're going to experience new things.
Those two kind of go hand in hand. Like, have the imagination and creativity to come up with something new and different, and then have the gumption to do it, because you're either going to win and you'll succeed and get it done, or you're going to learn a whole bunch. And unfortunately, we seem to classify learning as failure. And to me, we can read books and learn, but if we learn through experience, that's a failure. Not good enough in my book. Not good enough in my book. You ladies have been absolutely incredible in terms of your shares. You've really busted open the idea of storytelling and career and goal setting and trending, being the first person to go out and set trailblaze and set yourself up as an example for others. There'll be people who've been watching this and now thinking, I need more. I need more. So Stacia, what is the best way for people to get in contact with you?
I think you can email me at story@staciakeogh.co.uk, and you can also, I have a website called StoryPres at the moment, and that's storytelling and presentation skills.co.uk. You can book on to a discovery call, or I do several little packages where if you're going to be presenting and you're bricking it or pitching and you're like going, I can go in there and rescue you. And then I have a 5-step course that I run pretty regularly, almost every other month. So it's 30 days, 5 steps, how to turn your stories into business assets.
Ooh, all sound fabulous. And if you're watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast, all in the show notes, folks. Otherwise, you're going to have to go and find them. Up next, Janine, how do people get in touch with you? Because there's a lot of stuff that you do with women right now in terms of supporting them in up-leveling their careers. So if there's somebody who's listening or watching right now and really interested to dive a little bit deeper, what's the best way of getting in touch with you?
Yeah, so I would say come and connect with me on LinkedIn because I love hanging out over there. Janine Esbrand on LinkedIn. Also go and check out my podcast. So my podcast is called the Career Changemaker Podcast. It's on iTunes and all of the other places where you listen to podcasts. And I run a career clarity program, so for people who are trying to figure out what the next step in their career should be. And so if you head to my website, lightboxcoaching.com, you can find more details about it there. But the best way is just to connect me on LinkedIn because I like connecting with people and having conversations. So I would say that's the first place to go.
Fantastic. Do go and check out those details again as well in the same location. So if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see them in the show notes. If you're listening on the podcast, you'll see those in the show notes. If you're watching on the TV show, then you'll have to go and find the show notes. It's been wonderful speaking to both of you ladies today. Thank you so much for all the great work that you're doing in the world and for helping us to decide upon those stories and the value that we really bring such that we can have a greater impact in the world. That brings us to the end of today's show. If you're watching or listening, please make sure that you give us a comment and a like. And until next time, have a wonderful rest of the day wherever you are in the world. Ciao for now.